few things are being attempted with this course. Previously, this course was student-centered, and while this is valuable, it was missing something. Previously, the course presented models of and ideas about leadership and asked students to identify their passions. This year, the course presented students with an intractable global issue and challenged them to address it. And throughout the course of the year, students are asked about their passions and their relevance to the learning experience, but are doing so while throwing their hearts into a problem and a solution that lasts the entire year throughout the course. I've gathered from one semester at KSU that leadership studies strives to think differently. This is true in more than one sense, but the school has been incredibly effective for me, and that has taught me to participate effectively, think critically, and reason ethically. Where else in my education will I be asked to consider the confluences of forces that make up the individual characters of all other human beings, or be asked why I believe what I believe? I'm tempted to say anthropology or courses in logic and philosophy, but for me, a component of leadership studies is a summation of the more applicable ideas of these courses. Now, what this course strives for is to grow students' character by exposing them to problems outside of themselves. The objective of this character education isn't to teach students certain values or fill them with another ideology, but to grow the depth of understanding of their own values. So, to give an example, our class is dealing with the issue of orphanage tourism. So in an assignment, we'd be asked to identify the foundations of our values in respect to child well-being. We could then be asked how these values relate to our parents' values, dominant cultural values, or faith-based values, and how these things have developed our understanding of who we are. Orphanage tourism is a perfect example of good intentions gone awry. Considerable evidence suggests that in Cambodia, 75% of children living in orphanages aren't actually orphans. These children have living parents. In Nepal, the same is true for about 2/3 of children living in orphanages. And the reason for this is the demand for international service coming from countries like Britain and the United States. And these are good-intentioned people who want to help, and children are kidnapped at alarming rates to satisfy the need for international volunteerism. 90% of orphanages in Nepal are located in key tourist districts. Traffickers discover that tourists and volunteers are willing to donate to orphanages. They set out to rural villages and kidnap children. They promise parents a good education and a boarding school for their children, and then whisk them away to illegal orphanages. It's hard for some people to wrap their heads around the idea that parents are willingly giving their children to strangers, but I think we can make sense of the problem. A friend of mine took a trip to Nepal to take photos of a school for an organization. And he went with his wife, and they didn't have any kids. And when villagers took notice of this, they begged him and his wife to take their children back to America so that they could have a better life. And I think it's the same love that parents have for their children that human traffickers are manipulating when they tell parents that they can give their children an education. And their next step is to manipulate the good intentions of international volunteers. Realizing the cruelty that is involved in this exploitation, it makes this such an easy thing to get behind. This is Damon, and he was 13 when he was rescued from an orphanage in the outskirts of the capital city of Nepal last November. He weighed 40 pounds when he was rescued. That's about the weight of a kindergartner. He was rescued with 17 other children, though there were reports of there sometimes being up to 30 children living in this orphanage. All children slept in one small room, unclean, no water, and the food in the building was crawling with insects. When they found Damon, he was severely malnourished and psychologically damaged. He was 13 and could not tie his shoelaces. He is stricken with post-traumatic stress. This orphanage was receiving donations from a nonprofit based in the UK, and when the orphanage attracted its first volunteer, a British nurse who quickly discovered what was going on, it was shut down, and an organization called Next Generation Nepal was notified. Next Generation Nepal is an organization that houses children rescued from trafficking and reconnects them with their families. I've actually been able to connect with this organization. The country director, Martin, gave a lecture at Kansas State University, and that's how I heard Damon's story. Since finding him, NGN has located Damon's family and is currently working on reuniting them. Damon has been permanently scarred, though. He will never recover, physically or psychologically. There are many more like him that will never escape illegal orphanages while they're still young. Even when children in orphanages aren't trafficked, orphanage tourism is still harmful. Foreign volunteers are rarely trained to work with psychologically damaged children, and they don't understand the culture or the values of the location they're working in. Local workers are better carers in that respect. And when foreign volunteers are volunteering overseas, they deny local workers the chance for employment. So people that understand the culture, can speak the local language, can help children grow up with values similar to the society that they're living in. They're being denied this because foreigners are doing it instead. The good news is that raising awareness of this issue helps the cause tremendously. Creating conversation works. The American, Swiss, French, and British embassies have changed their travel advice and now tell tourists of the child exploitation that results from orphanage tourism. As people talk more about this issue, the more national and international media will give it attention. Some tour companies are changing their practices, and some NGOs are revising their volunteer policies and mission statements. More people need to become aware of the dangers of orphanage tourism, and governments still need to continue to develop better positions and strategies. What individuals can do to help solve this problem is talk about it. As a larger percentage of people know about this issue, a small number of people will be willing to volunteer in orphanages overseas. The bottom line is that we wouldn't let America's orphan children be tourist attractions, so we should stop doing the same to other countries.